She was invisible to everyone. Just a cleaner, wiping floors no one noticed. But when the CEO walked past and heard her speaking fluent German, then French, then Japanese, everything changed right there, right then. This is the story of how a woman the world ignored ended up in the boardroom. Before starting the story, make sure to subscribe the channel so that you don't miss any update in future. Everyone passed by her like she didn't exist. Just another cleaner in a crumpled uniform, head down, mop in hand. Invisible, silent, forgettable. But that day, something unusual happened. The CEO of the company, a man known for being cold, robotic, and always in a rush, stopped. Not because he slipped. Not because something was out of place. He stopped because he heard something. Something impossible. As he walked past the hallway near the HR department, he caught a voice, sharp, confident, and in perfect German. He paused. That couldn't be right. No one in that section spoke German. Then he heard it again, a few rapid phrases. Flawless. Native. Educated. He turned the corner, thinking maybe someone from the international team was visiting. But the hallway was empty, except for her. The cleaner. A woman in her late 40s, wiping the glass wall, lips moving softly. Talking on the phone, smiling, focused. The CEO stood in silence, watching. She hadn't seen him yet. Then, just as he was about to turn away, she switched languages. Now it was French. Fast, elegant, Parisian dialect. Then Japanese. Not textbook Japanese, real, fluent, casual Japanese. The kind you hear in downtown Tokyo. The CEO froze. He wasn't shocked. He was shaken. Like the ground under him had cracked for a moment. He watched her hang up the phone, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. And in that exact second, he knew one thing. She didn't belong here. He cleared his throat, loud enough for her to hear. She flinched like a school kid caught passing notes. Her phone slipped slightly in her hand as she turned. Eyes widened, back straightened, and her expression instantly shifted from calm to confused, then nervous. "Sir," she whispered, clutching the cleaning spray like it was her only defense. She wasn't sure if she was in trouble. She wasn't even sure he'd heard her. But his eyes, they weren't angry. They were curious. Intense. "What language were you just speaking?" he asked slowly, like every word was being measured. She hesitated. "Japanese. And before that, French. And earlier." "German," she replied, almost apologetically. There was silence. She waited for him to laugh. Or walk away. Or maybe even scold her for using her phone on duty. But instead, he asked the strangest question. "How many languages do you speak?" She blinked, looked down at her shoes, then said softly, "Fluently? 9. He chuckled, not because he didn't believe her, but because it was so absurd. 9 languages? From someone wiping floors? It didn't make sense. Not in his world. So he asked again, this time like a boss interviewing a genius. "Name them." And without skipping a beat, she did. "Hindi, English, German, French, Japanese, Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, Russian." Each one rolled off her tongue like she'd been born speaking them. The CEO looked at her, stunned, as if the cleaning cart behind her had turned into a throne. In that hallway, in those few seconds, her mop, her gloves, her uniform, none of it mattered anymore. Because standing there wasn't a cleaner. It was someone the world had overlooked for far too long. And he realized. He'd just discovered the smartest person in the entire building. He didn't say another word. Just looked at her, for a second longer than people usually do. And then walked away. She stood there, stunned. Did she do something wrong? Was she going to get fired? Her stomach twisted into a knot. She hated attention. Hated questions. She had spent years perfecting invisibility, the art of blending into corners, being just the cleaner, never saying too much, never being noticed. And now? She was noticed by the CEO himself. The rest of her shift blurred by an anxious flashes, scrubbing, wiping, thinking. Did she speak too casually? Should she have lied? Should she have stayed silent? But the truth is, staying silent was something she'd mastered. Her whole life had been silence. She had a master's degree in linguistics from a university no one here had even heard of. Back home, she'd been a language coach, training diplomats, translating for conferences, writing textbooks. But when the war broke out, she lost everything. Her home, her job, her husband, her country. She fled with her daughter, just 9 years old, and a suitcase full of certificates no one here cared about. No local experience. Overqualified for entry level. Your accent might confuse customers. She'd heard it all. So she picked up a mop instead of a mic. Not because she lacked talent, but because survival doesn't care about your resume. She learned to disappear into the background. Let her brilliance gather dust while she cleaned someone else's. But no matter what, she never stopped speaking. Not in her head. Not at home. Not in her heart. And today, for the first time in years, someone had actually listened. Next morning, she walked into the lobby like nothing had happened. Same uniform, same routine, same silence. She had convinced herself it was just a moment, a glitch in the system. CEOs don't care about cleaners. That's just not how the world works. But as she turned the corner to clock in, he was there, the CEO, waiting, not with a frown, not with security, with a smile. "Come with me," he said. No explanation, no time to think. She followed, heart thudding so loud she thought he might hear it echoing in the hallway. They walked past the offices she used to clean, past the conference rooms where she'd scrubbed coffee stains from expensive tables. Now, for the first time, she was walking in as a guest, not a ghost. He led her into a glass-walled meeting room. Sunlight poured in, like the universe was suddenly paying attention. On the table, there was a laptop, a cup of tea, and a printed resume. Her resume. She froze. "How did you?" "I have a team. They found your LinkedIn profile. Or what's left of it." He paused, looked her dead in the eye. "You speak 9 languages. You've trained ambassadors. And you're scrubbing my floors." She didn't respond. Because what do you say to that? That life isn't fair? That brilliance means nothing without opportunity? That some of us were born on ladders and others in holes? But she didn't have to say anything. He already knew. "Tell me," he said slowly, "if you had the chance, would you teach again?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because no one had asked her that in years. And just like that, the walls she'd built inside her, the ones made of survival and silence, started to crack. This wasn't a job interview. This was a resurrection. She stared at the CEO, her fingers trembling slightly. No one had said that word to her in years. Teach. It felt foreign on her ears, like an old melody she'd forgotten she loved. For a second, she let herself imagine. A whiteboard. A room full of curious faces. The thrill of explaining complex grammar in 5 different languages before lunch. But then, reality came crashing back. What if this was a joke? What if he was just being polite? What if she got her hopes up, only to be reminded again where she belonged? She looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I remember how." The CEO leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on her. "That's not what your past says." She bit her lip. 1,000 emotions fought inside her. "I've cleaned these floors for 5 years, she said, her voice now steady. "Not once has anyone asked me what I can do beyond a mop." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time someone did." For a split second, time paused. It was like the universe had stopped scrolling and zoomed in on her. She wasn't background noise anymore. She was the main story. And for the first time in forever, she allowed herself to ask, what if I'm more than what they see? She didn't have the answer yet, but something had awakened. A small spark inside, one she thought had died. But maybe, just maybe, it had been waiting for someone to speak her name with purpose. The CEO stood up slowly and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, as if weighing the weight of the world, or maybe just the next few words. She sat frozen. 5 years of silence in this building, and now she couldn't keep up with the sound of her own heartbeat. Finally, he turned. "I want to run a new program," he said, "for international interns." She blinked, unsure what that had to do with her. "We get talent from all over the world. But there's always a gap: culture, communication, confidence. They struggle. They leave. We lose them." He paused, then looked her dead in the eye. "I need someone who can bridge that gap." Silence. Her throat tightened. He wasn't offering her a second chance. He was asking her to be the bridge for others first. "You want me to teach them?" "No," he said. Her heart sank. "I want you to lead the program." Everything inside her went still. Lead? Not assist. Not shadow. Not observe. Lead. For a moment, the ceiling felt like it was spinning. She wasn't sure if she was about to cry, or laugh, or faint. "I clean your toilets," she whispered. "I don't even have a proper suit." He smiled. "You've been cleaning more than that," he said. "You've been surviving. That's the hardest job of all." She swallowed hard, eyes shimmering. Still unsure. Still scared. But in that moment, something inside her stood up, even though her body hadn't moved an inch. She nodded. Not fully, not confidently. Just enough to let herself hope. And the CEO? He walked out of the room, leaving her there in a sunlit silence, surrounded by a future she never thought would knock again. She sat alone in the staff locker room. The same bench, the same broken fan overhead, the same smell of bleach clinging to her uniform. But she wasn't the same. Not anymore. Her phone buzzed, an old message from her son in another country. "Ma, did you ever become a teacher again?" She stared at that one line, and her throat closed up. She'd told him once, when he was just a little boy. "Someday, Beta. Someday when life lets me breathe again." But life hadn't. Not until now. She opened the rusted locker and looked at her reflection in the tiny mirror stuck inside. Not young, not polished, but there was something in her eyes. A flicker, like an ember that had waited patiently beneath the ash for one breath of wind. And now it had it. Still, the doubts were loud. What if they laugh? What if I forget everything? What if I fail? But another voice whispered back, one she hadn't heard in years. "What if you rise?" She stood up slowly, took off her janitor apron and folded it neatly, laid it on the bench like it was the last chapter of an old life. Then, she pulled out a folder. Old certificates, faded degrees, letters of recommendation from another continent, another time. She ran her fingers over them, like a soldier polishing her old medals before heading back to war. This wasn't just about a new job. This was a return to herself. The woman who could switch between Spanish and Mandarin without blinking. The woman who once taught in a refugee camp with no chalk and still made kids dream. She looked back in the mirror. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just nodded once, like a queen reclaiming her crown from the dust. Because some identities? They don't die. They wait. She walked through the glass doors. Not with a manager's stride, but with the hesitation of someone still hearing the sound of her mop in the back of her mind. People stared. Some confused. Some curious. One or two, amused. The badge on her chest now read Program Lead, Multilingual Onboarding. But in her head, she could still hear last week's gossip. Isn't she the cleaner? How's she gonna lead anything? Her palms were sweating. She held onto her folder like it was a shield. And then, the interns walked in. 12 of them. From 12 different countries. Eyes wide. Shoulders tense. Just like she had been when she first entered this building with a vacuum cord wrapped around her hope. She took a deep breath. Opened the session. "Hello," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I know what it feels like to not fit in." 12 heads turned. Not one blinked. She switched to French, then to Arabic, then to Hindi. One sentence in each, just enough to let every intern feel something stir in their chest. Recognition, relief, respect. The room exhaled together. And she felt it. For the first time in years, she belonged. Not because someone gave her permission, but because she claimed it in every syllable, every accent, every I that finally saw her. And as she watched the nervous faces begin to open up, she realized something. Maybe this job wasn't a promotion. Maybe it was a mission. Weeks passed. Sessions turned into conversations. Conversations turned into friendships. One afternoon, a shy intern approached her after class. His eyes, usually downcast, looked her straight in the eye. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I got my first job interview here, because of you." She blinked, caught off guard. "How?" she asked, heart pounding. "You showed me how to speak with confidence. How to not be scared." For the first time, she saw herself not as a cleaner, not as a forgotten face, but as a catalyst. Her lessons weren't just words. They were lifelines. She looked around the room filled with faces she had helped shape, and realized something bigger. Her story wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about empowerment. About showing the world that even when you're buried under life's dirt, you can still rise and pull others up with you. Because sometimes the brightest leaders come from the quietest places. And sometimes the world just needs to listen. The CEO wasn't supposed to be here. A last-minute meeting called him to the floor where she was running the session. He stepped inside quietly, unnoticed. At first, he watched from the corner. The way she switched languages effortlessly. The way the interns lit up when she spoke. His brow furrowed. Because this wasn't the janitor he'd seen months ago. This was something else. Something rare. After the session ended, he approached her. No pomp. No fanfare. Just a simple, genuine smile. "I've been watching," he said. "You've transformed this program, and honestly me." She looked up, eyes wide. He continued, "You remind me why we started this company in the first place." That day, he didn't just promote her title. He promoted her story, her resilience, her voice, her power. Because some people don't just clean floors. They cleanse the soul of a place. Her new office was small. No fancy furniture. No golden plaques. Just a desk, a laptop, and a world waiting to be changed. But she didn't care. Because this was more than a job. It was a promise. A promise to herself. To every soul she had ever cleaned floors alongside. Every challenge that came her way, new projects, skeptical coworkers, endless meetings, was just another mountain to climb. And she climbed it with the same grit that had kept her going all these years. Late nights, early mornings, countless cups of coffee. She learned to balance languages, cultures, and egos. Her secret weapon was empathy. She wasn't just a leader. She was a bridge between dreams and reality, between silence and voice. And with every small victory, she reminded the world, you can rise, even when no one expects you to. Years from now, when people talk about that cleaner who spoke 9 languages, they won't just remember the story of a promotion. They'll remember a movement, a story that whispered loudly, "No matter where you start, your voice matters." She sat by the window of her modest office, watching the city buzz beneath her. A smile played on her lips, because she knew this was just the beginning. There were more stories to change, more voices to lift. And maybe, just maybe, the next one is listening right now. So, if you ever feel invisible, remember her story. And remember this: the power to rise isn't in a title. It's in the courage to keep speaking, even when no one's listening. No matter where you start in life, your true power lies in your voice and your courage to rise, especially when the world isn't listening. Sometimes, the greatest leaders emerge from the most unexpected places, proving that resilience and empathy can change not just your story, but the lives of those around you.